All right, well, hello everyone. So nice to see you all here. Thank you for joining us this evening for our webinar. I'm really excited to introduce Jason. He's one of our current staff members, and what's really funny is he's actually one of our first staff members who was also a alumnus of the class. Isn't that right, Jason?
This is true.
Jason, yeah, took the class since freshman year, if I'm not mistaken, and has been a member of the community ever since. And we're so glad to have him. I know a couple years ago I did a version of this webinar for everybody, but we wanted, and obviously I could do it again, but we really wanted the fresh blood um to do this, and we're so excited that Jason's willing. He's a current undergrad at Harvard, number three in the world at IBO. So really fantastic and far more qualified than me even to talk about this. So I'm excited to have him here. For those who don't know, we do have class after this, so we have a hard out at 8. So without much further ado, I want to introduce Jason and let him start. And if you ask a question, please put it in the chat. If we don't get to it, ask it again at the end. And we'll have a Q&A. So don't worry if we don't address every question. We want to keep the presentation going. So yeah, please everyone give a warm welcome to Jason. And yeah, oh yeah, and the recording will be actually posted probably on our YouTube channel, I believe. So yes, everyone, please, yeah, please follow us on YouTube. It'll probably be on one of them. Yeah, we have a YouTube channel. It's not very big. We sort of only post a couple things on there. But without further ado, Jason, please take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Kevin. Very fine introduction for a very fine man. Here, let me look at my slides. Um, Here, can everyone see this? Um, but yeah, I guess I'll just give a quick outline of like what I'll talk about. But I think from the advertisement, people could tell. Mainly, I'm going to be talking about like my experience with USABO, my experience with like high school in general. Other things that I've done. But I think mainly we'll start talking about USABO. I think I know many of you people here tonight are students in the class, so some of this content might be stuff you've already heard for. But for those of you who are like either not in the class or maybe some of the parents out there, this is like nice to know. I'll talk about my experience with RSI and other research. I did both like Olympiads and research in high school, so I think I can offer some dual perspective on this, but also like how to just like survive in high school. I was having like a great time, but also like sometimes not a great time in high school. So I think for many of you who are high schoolers who like would like some advice, this would be helpful. And lastly, the big question, we're all here to talk about college applications. So I'll talk about it for a brief period, but that's not really the main focus. So we'll spend some time on it. And of course, we'll have some time for questions at the end. So I will not be monitoring the chat for now. But yeah, quick introduction. Kevin basically hit the nail on the head. But most of high school, I would say that I like competed in USABO a lot. I did do some like intellectual exploration, mainly like in junior year. I chose to I started research in like sophomore year, and I think I like leaned more heavily into that. But I also like explored a lot intellectually that year. But for the most part, I came back to senior year to compete for the USA at the IBO. Had a great time. Met lots of super cool people. Had a great time. And got a free vacation to Kazakhstan. Always a win in the books. But yeah, feel free to ask me about like any of these experiences or anything. I'm here to be like hopefully a helpful resource, not just like another person to yap at you guys. But yeah, okay. Without further ado, let's just talk about USABO. So first, I'll like share some pictures. Those of you who have read my blog, which I think is posted on our website now, but I kind of detailed a bit this in writing. So this is kind of just a description of like how I got into USPO and my experience with it. Here's a picture from 2022 camp. This was my first time going to in-person camp, so it was a really great experience. Met lots and lots of fun people. This was like down in Virginia at Marymount. This is a picture from 2021 online camp. This was very scuffed. Basically, they just put us into a Zoom for like 8 hours straight, and then we would listen to people lecture and yap. But it was not a great time. You didn't really get to meet anyone, but still, many biology alumni in this photo as well, and it was a great time. And then I was fortunate enough to make it to the team 2 years. So this is first in 2022 when I qualified for the team. Unfortunately, the US did not compete this year, but we got a nice trip to DC, and also I got to see my friends again. And then this was more recently, just I guess not last summer, but last summer. This is when Team USA won 4 golds at the IBO. In fact, I actually think 2 of the fellow team members are in the webinar today. So shout out to Frederick and Suzuko. It was a great experience. Had a lot of fun time, like met a lot of people. But this is, I guess, this is kind of like the glamorous side of like USPO, or at least like for me, these are like the peaks of my USPO journey. I had a great time here. But what you don't see is like what happens behind the scenes. I think any of you can relate, but USPO is like a lot of hours, a lot of studying, lots and lots of Zodo PDF reader. But I think if you're not like if you don't just like type U into your browser and immediately autofills like USABO-TRC, that means you're not like grinding hard enough. You got to grind harder. I think even to this day, if I type in U or like P for like past exams, it just like autofills immediately. But it's a nice reminder of like the dedication I put in um, during high school. But yeah, okay. Without further ado, let's just talk about the USABO structure. For many of you, this is like repeat information, but I think as a whole, this is like good to know. But USABO like first has like an open exam. This is like the equivalent to like the AMC 10, like for those of you like coming from like Math Olympiad. But this is like open to everyone. Usually we have around like 10,000 students register, but usually around like 5,000 or so actually like take the open exam. In past years, it was on AOPS, but I think the platform has changed this year, so like stay posted. But this is going to be 50 multiple choice questions in 50 minutes. So if you do the math, that's roughly like one question per minute. And then the top 10% of open scores make it to semifinals. And so that's probably around like 500 students. In recent years, it's been a little less. And then this is going to be a 2-hour long exam with like 4 parts. There's like two multiple choice parts, like a multiple true false part, and a free response question. So for the most part, you can see that USPO is mostly going to be multiple choice questions. And the time pressure is roughly a ratio of like 1 question per minute. And then from that, the top 20 semifinal scores get invited to compete at USPO National Finals, also called CAMP. It's this like 2-week residential program. It's all expenses paid for. You get to meet lots and lots of cool people from across the country, and you get to learn biology for like 2 weeks straight. But yeah, last year was at Harvard. I think they're probably in talks. It's going to be at Harvard again this year. And then from that, they want to select the Team USA who will actually compete at the IBO, and that is the top 4 competitors. So from this, you can see that the USPO structure is like relatively like brief. There's only like 4 real tiers between like any person taking the open exam all the way to like competing at the International Biology Olympiad. So it can feel a little discouraging, or at least for me, it was like very discouraging to think that there's kind of this like very big like gap between like semifinals and finals. Narrowing it down from like 10,000 or 5,000 to 500 seems doable, but from 500 to just 20, this seemed like a very insurmountable task for me. And so I remember that this was like a point of big concern, but I truly believe this now, like having done the competition for 4 years. I think that like anyone with the right dedication and the right like commitment can truly have like a very good shot at making finals. And so, for example, I think like those of like you new students who are taking the open exam, you might think like, oh my God, this is so hard. How can anyone possibly answer these questions? All you need to remember is that like here are the statistics posted by the CE themselves. And you can see that the median on these exams is just 21. And the cutoff to actually make semis is just 23. So if you can just do like 2 points higher than semis, 2 points higher than the median, then that's like enough to qualify for semis. And semifinals is like a great achievement to like put on your college applications. And then from there, you can see that like the USPO semifinal exam score distribution, you can see that the median is around here of like 50 to like 58 points. And the cutoff to make camp is just about 85. So if you can just do like, I guess like, roughly some math, like 60% better or so than like the median or the average, then you have a very good shot at making camp. And so this is like very achievable for many people. I'll talk about this a bit more in the presentation, but I think a biggest thing is like clearing this mental hurdle and like believing in yourself is like very. Okay, this takes us to the number one USPO question I always get asked from people who are like on the fence or like thinking about going to USPO but don't know if they'd be great at it. Is there a lot of memorization? I'd say yes and no. I think obviously I think that knowledge plays like a very big portion in USABO, but I think that there are a lot of skills and there are a lot of like problem solving abilities that you actually use for USABO. And so yes, like unavoidably, everyone's going to have to put in the time to actually like read the textbooks, learn the material. But I think that's the case for any Olympiad. It's just the nature of like spending time is different. Maybe for like AMC or like Amy and stuff, you might just be like grinding questions all the time, not really reading books. Whereas USABO is a lot more, I think, like reading books and then like doing a bit of practice. But yeah, quick check on time. How am I doing? I think I'm doing fine. Okay, this takes us to like what I think are the 3 pillars of USABO. And I can fit them on the categories. First, knowledge, as I said, you really can't do USABO unless you actually enjoy reading textbooks. I know for some of you freshmen out there, that might sound very strange. Like I've never pulled open a textbook and like read it cover to cover, and I certainly hadn't before I started for USABO. But I think you'll like come to enjoy it, and if you don't come to enjoy it, then maybe that's a sign that like USABO might not be for you, and that's like perfectly okay. But from everyone I've spoken to who's made camp, they like genuinely enjoy reading like textbooks. In fact, like I sometimes miss this in college because I think like college classes and like also like high school classes, a lot of the time is like content that you just like follow a class, whereas like actually just like sitting down with a textbook, there's a lot of like knowledge to be absorbed. And you can like kind of approach it at your own pace. And I kind of miss like in high school, I'd always just like come home and I would like read a textbook for like 7 hours. And I think even if not for USPO, like I would still enjoy that process by itself. But of course, USPO like gave me like some, I don't know, like productive like venture to like channel this towards, which I think is very great. For like, I guess, rough scope of how much you should be reading, I think most of the finalists I've talked to, they've read about like 3 or more textbooks. I think the like fewest I've read is like the fewest I've heard is that like someone had read just like 1 textbook in mid camp. I think that's definitely more the exception than the rule. I think typically like 3 to like 5 textbooks is standard. And so um, yeah, just like know that this is kind of the road ahead. The second is problem solving. I mentioned this earlier. Like a lot of questions, like some of them are just like rote memorization. It's like, oh, which of the following is that? And it's just like you just select the answer. There's not much thought behind it. But some of the other questions, especially like at the higher tiers of the competition, require some serious like experience and practice with answering similar types of questions. And I think this is where like if you were maybe like a math kid before, this is like where these skills necessarily translate. You can like go to the past exam archive. They're very helpful. If you do all of them, you should start to see that there's like a finite number of questions that can be written. And like if you see the pattern, it's very easy to like preempt what the question is. Especially like certain sections of the exam, especially like genetics, for example, that is a lot of problem solving and actually like math. And so I think that USBO is not just like a Google simulator question. You actually do need to like read the question and think about it a lot. And the last, I mentioned this earlier, but is dedication. I think compared to a lot of other Olympiads, it's a lot more like delayed gratification when it comes to USBO. I think like, for example, a lot of like math people like enjoy preparing for like these AMC exams because they just like solving problems. So like every time they like get a problem right, or every time they do some interesting problem, they get like a little dopamine hit. But for USBO, I mean, I think a lot of people they like enjoy reading, but like they're not like I'm not going to read for like 3 years just to read, right? And so I think I would say that you should be patient with your USPO journey, especially because there is kind of like a big gap between like making semis and making finals. I think I know many finalists like were like just semi-finalists for like many years before they finally made camp. But yeah, if you're also on the cusp and you're like a top 50 student, that's a very great like place to be in. I know a lot of finalists were actually top 50 students like the year before they actually made camp for the first time. But yeah, also because like as a freshman, you're competing with like juniors and seniors who have been reading for like 3 years more than you. Obviously, like you're not going to be able to like compete at the same level. So you should be patient. Like eventually, one of these days you'll become a junior or like senior years. And so I think the meta is like shifting, like people are starting like even earlier and earlier. So if you're like kind of in this position where you felt like you didn't start early enough, I would say like this is just not true. At least in my experience, at least like I made camp within 1 year. I think maybe like not everyone can do that, but I just think that like I think 2 years is sufficient for anyone to like make camp. So I think theoretically like you could even start in sophomore year and like make camp by junior year if you study like all the sophomore year. I think a big thing also here is helpful is like finding a community, whether this is like an in-person community or obviously like biology is like a really nice community. But for me, at least, this is what really helped me through high school. Feeling like I have a lot of friends and a lot of peers here who would like study with me and it's like very motivating. And also you could like ask them questions and stuff and also like listen to upperclassmen and hear their advice. These were all like very helpful for my use of the journey. But yeah, I think these 3 categories are typically referred to in the useful community as MEM, intuition, and grind. And I think some linear combination of all these three is really necessary to make camp. But yeah, I mentioned this earlier, but I think as USPA goes on, I think less and less of it is just about like brute memorization. Especially like at the IBO level, I think most questions are not actually that challenging. I think actually IBO is designed to be like answerable with only like a Campbell's background. And I spoke to many of the other students from other countries. And in fact, that was like all of their preparation. They had just like read Campbell cover to cover, know it in and out. Um, and then the rest of it is actually just like answering questions based on this knowledge and using their problem solving ability. For many like US students, like this sounds like appalling, like you can't make camp with just like Campbell. But I think USABO is like slowly heading towards that direction in the coming years. So I think this is another thing to like keep in mind. Kind of an example of like 2 things I'm talking about. Here's like an opens level question. So I'm sure all of you in the like audience are starting to solve this as well, but you can see that there's really not that much thinking that goes on in this question. You just like answer, you just look at this. You can probably control F in like Campbell and you'll like find the answer, which is D. Whereas like, for example, this is like a semis question. This is actually like publishable like level, or like this is actually probably taken straight from paper, but this is actual like scientific level like thinking. You like interpret these graphs, you read the answers, and then you like make some decision. And for those of you tryhards out there, the answer is A for this, by the way. You can look at this. Okay. USABO test content. If you don't know this split, you should know the split because this will inform you like how you should study. But for the most part, USABO leans most heavily on animal anatomy and physiology, cell molecular biology, and genetics. And so you should really focus on studying these three categories first and foremost. Anatomy is, in my opinion, the most like time consuming or like the most like you should divert your time towards this because A, it gets tested on very frequently, and B, a lot of the stuff that you need to know is like beyond the scope of Campbell. And so I think many people will read like a book specifically anatomy and physiology, such as like Fox or Vander's, immediately following Campbell's. Next is cell and molecular biology. I think these questions are also very difficult because there's a lot of knowledge as well. But what's also difficult is that a lot of them are like these types of questions like in semis, where it's like a lot of reading, a lot of interpretation. So they can be very time consuming during semis. So I think having a lot of practice with these questions like sets you up for success. And lastly, we have genetics. Genetics is, I think, a lot of like math and problem solving questions because inherently genetics is like a very quantitative field. So I think a lot of this is just like practicing, like solving using probability. All these kinds of like intuitions are like very important. And then lastly, we have like plant anatomy and physiology and ecology, ethology, biosystematics. These are like less heavily favored, especially like ecology, ethology, biosystematics. But I think people kind of like ignore these categories a little too much. I think that yes, they're not worth that many points, but if you like add them up together between like the last three categories, that's like a whole 20% of the exam, right? And I think for the most part, these are very free questions that you should almost always be getting because you don't really need that much knowledge beyond Campbell. And ultimately, then it just comes down to problem solving. And so if you get a question wrong here, you really have no one to blame but yourself. So I think you should definitely spend some time at least just like collecting free points in these categories. But yeah. Okay, especially for the new students here, just like a recap of the resources that we recommend here at Biology. Obviously, the first book that everyone should read is Campbell Biology. This is the official textbook that like both IBO uses and that USABO uses. And so most of the questions are going to be testing on content from here. I know that it can be very expensive to buy like the newest edition, like a new, never owned before, like hardcover book from like Amazon can be very expensive. So I would not recommend like just going out and buying the newest version. You can like buy like maybe like one older version or like a few older versions. I think anything beyond like ninth edition is like pretty up to date and good enough. In fact, my first ever copy of Campbell's was the 11th edition and it was pre-owned. And so actually like the cover was like slightly like falling off. Some of the pages were like missing, but I very nostalgic. I unfortunately don't have that book with me here. But that book is like very important to me and it holds like a lot of personal significance as well. But anyways, after reading Campbell, I recommended earlier, but I think first you should read an anatomy textbook. So either like Fox Human Physiology or Vander's Human Physiology. These are two of the most popular books that most finalists read. This is really good for just like shoring up anatomy content because I think Campbell doesn't talk about it enough. Following that, I think most people will read a genetics or like a molecular cell biology book. So for genetics books, we have Griffiths and Brooker's. The main reason why these two books are really great is because I think genetics is more than just content. Genetics has a lot of problem solving, and these two books have good like practice problems in like the end of chapters. So you should spend time like doing these questions in addition to like obviously like the USABO past exams in genetics. But both of these books are great. Lots of finalists endorse both of these. And for the biochem and molecular cell biology book, I think Albert's molecular biology of the cell is the like golden standard when it comes to molecular biology. In fact, even like beyond USABO, like when you come to college, like college courses will actually use this textbook. So if you already own it, that's like great. You know, you save some money, but also like if you can show to like college professors that you already like know this content, this is like very impressive. And it's also for biochemistry, it's going to be Ledinger Principle of Biochemistry. Don't read the whole book. There's like a portion of the book that is useful. It's like I think it's on our like blog page, but this is very good for like shoring up your intuition for biochemistry questions. I think USABO doesn't ever ask like very rarely asks super quantitative chemistry questions. You know, that kind of falls into the purview of like USANCO. But I think like having a good intuition for how biochemistry works, at least like in a hand wavy way, is like very, very beneficial for understanding questions when it comes to like intuition. But yeah, okay. When it comes to plant biology, the gold standard is Raven's plant biology. But I think some other people also read Thais plant physiology. I would have to recommend Raven's instead. I've read both of these. I've actually enjoyed reading both of these books. But you know, I think reading Thais is like quite low yield, so you should read Raven's biology, which is the one on the left. But yeah. And here are some additional books just like for review. There's Costanza Physiology. This is I think like I know like Jonah likes reading this book, but Costanza Physiology is pretty good. There's also like the BRS books, which are like very condensed versions of like big textbooks. And also the BRS Physiology book is also written by Costanza, which I think is quite fun. Okay, great. So that was a ton of resources. I think these like all these resources are on our blog. So like if you don't catch all these names, it's fine. You can see them online. But how do I actually study? Um, I think I get this question a lot. And I tell everyone, like, I don't know, I can't tell you. Because like what works for me doesn't work for you. And also what works for other people won't work for you. I think that especially because a lot of high schoolers, this is the first time you like need to actually like study for real. I think like, you know, elementary school, middle school, like people aren't studying that much. Really like probing like what study techniques work well for you is like a good use of your time, both for high school, USABO, and also like for college. So you should try like many different things. If something's not working, don't just like complain, say like, oh, you know, USPO is not for me. I can't sit still. I can't read this book. You know, maybe like you're just not using the right approach. So I think some recommendations from like other finalists are, you know, flashcards and repetition. I know Anki is like very popular. You can also use like Quizlet to make your flashcards. But this is mainly just for like knowing content. This doesn't actually help you with questions or like comprehension, I think. Next, some people obviously you can take notes while you read, especially like when you're reviewing right before the exams, you don't want to like go read the actual textbook again. You can just read your notes again. And also you can like kind of curate, you can edit what portions are actually most useful from the textbooks. And you know, some other like learning techniques, you know, there's the Feynman technique, which is like after you read a chapter, pretend like you're trying to explain this chapter to someone else. For me, actually, I use the Feynman technique a lot when I was studying for USABO. I was not really like a big like note taker or like flashcard maker, but I would like read a textbook and then I would read a chapter and then immediately after, like while still fresh in my mind, I would try to explain the content to like an imaginary like person. And oftentimes I realized that like I thought I understood it while reading, but like from trying to explain it, shows that there were like some gaps in my comprehension. But yeah, also Pomodoro timers, you know, like read for 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break. This is very helpful for me because I like can't sit still very well. So I can't like read for like hours on end. I have to like take a break. But this is a pretty nice pace. I think this is roughly like every like few pages so you can like take a break and like really think about it. You know, combining these two I think is very powerful. You know, you like read for a bit, then you explain it, and you take a rest, and then you read again. But anyways, whatever works for you works for you. Okay. When it comes to test taking strategy, first, USBO is a multiple choice exam. This is the case at opens. This is also the case at semis. This is also the case at finals and IBO. You know, because there's like a true or false statement. So you should be really good at like evaluating statements if they're true or false, rather than having to like come up with your own statements. You know, there's like a free response portion on semis, but that's like kind of the exception. I think you should be really good at like reading and understanding. And so for that, like process of elimination is really like every USPO finalist like bread and butter. It's just so much easier to like say an answer is wrong, and then like just like rule out what's wrong, and therefore you're left with the only thing that's right. Also, another thing is especially on semis part B, where there are like multi-select questions, you don't want to just like find the correct answer and move on. You should actually like, if you have the time, of course, you should go through each answer choice and like make sure that they're wrong so that you didn't like make a mistake. There are many times when I was like doing open exams where I would just like see some answers like this is true, like I would like maybe circle this and move on, but I would always like check the remaining answer keys. Oh, sorry, the remaining answer choices. And unless I'm like very confident that they're all wrong, like then I would actually like give it some time. So I think some like very silly mistakes happen just because you're like think you're under all this time pressure and you see something you just like want to select it, but maybe you like misread it. So I'd always like recommend like reading all the answer choices at least. And lastly, again, like if you have to guess, at least like try to eliminate some answer choices. So just like purely by probability, your chance of getting it right is better. And also guessing is good because there's no penalty for guessing in USFL compared to like other exams. So you should always at least guess. And so especially if you're like running out of time towards the end of an exam, you should definitely try your best to make a good faith guess rather than just like a random guess. But yeah. My second other point is that you should always answer the question. You know, this seems like very intuitive, right? You suppose a multiple choice exam, you should answer the question. But you'd be surprised like how many times people get questions wrong just because they like either A, didn't understand the question, or B, like misread the question. USPO loves to throw around questions that are like, select the one that is not, or which of the following is like not like true or whatever. And if you're just reading too fast, you're going to like choose the right answer. And especially if you're not like reading the other answer choices, they'll just like make a silly mistake like that. This also goes for answer choices. Read answer choices very carefully. Um, Next, I think you should try to get into the question writer's mind. One thing I noticed is that like through the process of studying for USABO, not only did I get better at biology, of course, but I got better at just like taking exams as a whole. I was not like a D1 like text machine like in middle school, but I think by the end of college, or sorry, by the end of high school, I got like very good at answering like multiple choice exams specifically. This is useful because like AP exams are like multiple choice exams, but more importantly, the SAT is also a multiple choice exam. And so a lot of the like test taking strategies that I learned from USPO like were directly applicable when it came to the SAT. And lastly, meta solving can be quite useful. Like if you think that like the answer, like the question writer is like trying to trick you and like puts this answer choice, like if you can like understand that and like comprehend that, this is like then you can like avoid the trick of the question. But yeah. Okay. Lastly, we'll just go over like a USPO study season. Typically, most people like start like studying their journey. I guess like whenever you come in, you like come in like at a different point of the year. For the most part, people are just like studying content and like reading textbooks for like fall until around like December-ish, I think. And then when it comes to actually like January-ish, people start like transitioning more to actually like grinding questions. This isn't like some rule. I'm not saying that you like can't do practice exams until it's January. But I think there's a finite number of like previous practice exams, and so you should really try to get the most out of each of them. And so I think rather than just doing them randomly here or there, you should like do it in a very concerted, like a very deliberate burst. I think like if you can do all the practice exams like within a month, your mind is like very much wired for answering USPO and also like dealing with the time pressure. So I think you should try to conserve the exams, and also like if you're kind of forgetful like I am, I think I'm like somewhat forgetful of a person. By the time next year rolls around, I'm a little familiar with the questions, but I don't remember them like verbatim. So I like intentionally try to avoid doing the exams for as long as possible to save them like doing them again next year. So I can like re-get into the habit. But whatever works for you is what works for you. This is just like what has worked for me in the past. Okay. Um, I guess I can like I think we're like running a bit low on time, so I'll kind of like skip through this. But for me, I think my USPO experience was like very atypical. I like camped in freshman year, so that's obviously atypical. But I think a big thing is that for me, I struggled a lot with like believing in myself. I think, especially as a freshman, I was just like, there's just no way I can compete with all these seniors. Originally, like actually here, like this picture I showed, this is like a very personal picture to me. But I actually wrote this down in 2020. So this is May 2020. And I made this goal to eventually make USPO finals, like within the context of like by senior year at least. And so I like always knew that this would be a long-term journey. But it's like very daunting. It can be very daunting, especially for people coming into high school. But I would just say that you should not like get too caught up with like success in itself as a metric. You should like truly enjoy the process for itself, and like truly believe in yourself. But yeah, I guess like to distill what I just said is like it's about the journey, not the destination. But yeah. Okay. Lastly, we'll go over my like fun experience at IBO. Here's a picture from 2024 camp with like many of the people I know. I know Frederick is here, in the audience today. I think Kendall, the guy with the glasses there, he's at Harvard now. I actually speak to him quite often. Kevin and Vishal are both at MIT. Vishal is actually another of the staff members here. Hao Chen is at Cornell. But yeah, great experience, lots of fun. People had a great time. IBO was very memorable experience, and I still remember still lots of memories. I think I will like treasure these memories for many, many years. But I had a great time with the team. Met lots and lots of people. On the left here, you can see that's the picture of us with the Chinese team. In the middle, that's us with the UK team. And in the bottom right, that is us at the award ceremony after being presented with our gold medals. So very fun. Okay. That wraps it up for the USPO portion of the talk. I guess, should we do like questions at the end for like everything, or like questions at the end of each subsection? Um, what do we think would be better? Okay, I think we can just do, okay, we'll do all our questions at the end. So save your questions about USPO until we get to the end. But next I'll be talking about RSI and, RSI and research. Okay, first question, why should you do research? I think research just like complements all college applications very well. Like USABO obviously and like Olympiads can be quite impressive like in their own right. But they might not like it kind of struggles to like fit this into like some broader like college application like narrative. Like what do you like doing in life? Oh, I like reading textbooks and like answering questions. That's not a very great answer. Whereas like research like uses a lot of skills and like personal attributes. So I think it shows like dedication, it shows commitment to like a long-term project, and also like you can spin this into having like genuine like societal impact, whereas Olympiads are kind of like limited. And I think Olympiads are a little like artificially constructed. But yeah, also another thing that's nice is that if you're like maybe not the best fit for doing Olympiads, you have potential. Like you can still like make actual like real scientific progress. A lot of real professors, a lot of real researchers like never competed in Olympiads like in high school. And the converse is also true. Like a lot of Olympiad students don't end up doing real research. So um, if you have like a lot of good people skills, you're good at writing, you're good at like communicating your results, and you're really interested in like working on a project for a long time and showing like the progress, research might be a good fit for you. But yeah. I guess here's kind of like distilling it down. Both research and Olympiads are very high time commitments, but they're like time commitments in different ways. A lot of Olympiad people enjoy like spending time on like Olympiads because they like being good at stuff. They like being good at math. They like being good at science bowl, like these kinds of things. Whereas research, you would like really feel passionate about some project. Like I really want to like study this. I want to like do some original work in that. So depending on what motivates you, one may be better than the other. Research is inherently collaborative. You're like it's almost impossible to do any real like meaningful research just like in a vacuum. Obviously, you'll like probably have some kind of mentor, and you'll also be working in some kind of lab. And a big part about research is actually communicating your findings. Whereas Olympiads, this is like almost not at all part of the competition. And so a lot of like USABO finalists have mentioned like their USABO journeys feel very solitary. And in many ways, this is true. You're in your own room reading like textbooks for like hours every day for maybe like a year. But it's a great experience when you get to go to camp at least and like talk to other people about like your shared experience. But if this is not like a big like if this doesn't sound very interesting to you, maybe research would be a good fit. Um, Next, research typically has a very high barrier to entry. Especially like if you don't live close to like a college campus, it can be very hard to do in-person research. Granted, you can still do like virtual, like dry lab research. But for example, like if you want to do wet lab biology research, one of the prerequisites is almost that like you have to live near or be able to commute to some like lab quite frequently. And also you need to find a mentor, which can be quite hard. Whereas Olympiads, like any person can like pick up a book tomorrow and start studying for like any Olympiad they want. So this is also a very nice feature about Olympiads. It's very democratically accessible. Um, I also think the payoffs between research and Olympiads are like a little different. I think research for the most part has like almost like not linear, but like you put in more time and you'll get more out of it, I think. And like even if you aren't like submitting to like these really big and like prestigious like science fairs, you can still have like original work. You can like write about this. You can show something at the end of the day, like this is what you have. Whereas Olympiads, I think it's like a very non-linear like payoff. If you like spend all your time like studying for the AMC, and like you never qualify for Amy, you might as well have like spent like no time kind of or like at least like because some people think this way. And so if this is something that also like discourages you, maybe research is right for you. And lastly, when it comes to like at least college applications, again, I think that research just like in general like complements applications very well, and it gives you a lot to write about inherently. A lot of these essays ask about like, oh, what was the time that like you worked within like a group, or like what was the time that you've had some original thought that was meaningful to you? What was the time you disagreed with someone? These are all like things that naturally come up in the course of research and doing science. Whereas Olympiads, like I read a book. I got very good at this, right? And so I'm not saying that like you can't just do Olympiads, but I think a big thing about Olympiads is that like you should also find some kind of identity outside of this, which is like obviously very possible and very doable for everyone. So I think this is just like one thing to keep in mind. But also MIT specifically really values Olympiads. Like if you do quite well in an Olympiad, like any Olympiad, not just USABO, if you like qualify for camp, that's like a very good signal, like a very high chance of getting to MIT, but maybe like not for other schools such as like I don't know, like Stanford, like Princeton, or like Harvard, for example, or other like a lot of other top schools. But yeah, okay. RSI and other research camps. I think that for the most part, these are the best way for high schoolers to actually get into research. No like middle schooler like understands research really well, right? So like coming into high school, you may not have any experience with research. And so I think a lot of these camps are very structured. And so it's very nice. They like pair you with a mentor. They like, you live on campus, so you get to like go to the lab every day. And they like guide you through these, like the research progress. They might have like some like milestones. They might have like these deadlines, and at the end, they need like you to write a research report. All of this structure is very helpful for high school students actually getting into research. Of course, if you're very independent, you don't have to do any of these. And a lot of the time, I think a lot of like really good research gets done like outside of these camps. But these are just like, I think you should keep these on your radar if you're like at all interested in doing research. But yeah, most of these were most of these open their applications around like late fall. And I think like currently right now, like probably these applications are open if you're like a junior and looking for these things. And then they close around like winter to like early spring. So If you're a junior or like a sophomore maybe, and you're really interested in this, I think you should get on this right now. Make like a spreadsheet, look online. This can be as simple as a Google search or like a chat GPT query. Just say like, give me a list of like some of these like research camps I'm looking for high schoolers, and like give me like some spreadsheet. And that's a very good way of tracking this. Um, I also think this is really good practice for when you actually apply to college for real, because then you're like managing all these deadlines. You have to write like application essays. Some of these applications even require like teacher recommendations and like school endorsements. So really, it's just like a college application in miniature. So this is like a very good practice for that. But yeah. Most of these programs are going to be over the summer and like residential, and they may cost like a few $1,000s. Although some of them are also cost free now. But yeah, here's just like a quick, you know, collective sweep of like all the programs out here. Feel free to screenshot this if you want. But also MIT has like this very nice link giving like a comprehensive list of like all of these programs. And also here are some of the biggest science fairs that people mostly like present their research to or like compete in. So for example, like ISEF, you know, like STS, like JSHS, like people have heard about. Yeah. And also like the skills that like you need to do science fair well. I think a lot of these are also people skills. So like if you ever did like speech or debate before, they like translate very well. You know, like communicating your research, answering like Q&A, like responding to judges, knowing what judges want to hear. This is like all very useful and like good skills to develop. But yeah. Lastly, I'll give like my advice on doing research. Don't be afraid to be dumb. I think that's my biggest thing. Most professors, okay, this is not true for all professors, but most professors like already assume that you're dumb. So if you're dumb, that's like fine. You just like fit into their model. But you know, it's okay to be dumb. They're not expecting you to be like an intellectual like equal or like even like greater than them. They know that you're like new in your like research like journey, and so they're here to teach because like they want you to learn, and so you really want to learn, and you really want to like get better at research. And so don't come in like being like, oh, like I'm scared that I'll be bad. Like it's fine. Everyone was bad once. Also, communicate with your mentor, ask for help. You know, your mentor can't help you unless you tell them like what you need help with. So you should definitely communicate very often with your mentor and asking for help. But research is inherently a very slow process. Most like interesting research takes like months at least, up to like years to publish. And so don't be discouraged. You know, just like USABO, research is a very slow process, and these rewards are not going to be shown for like a long time. And lastly, you should find research projects that like actually align with your interests. Don't do research just because like it sounds good on paper or like it's like some buzzword like my new like ML model like predicts blah blah blah. You should like truly feel interested in your research because A, like you'll want to do it more, but B, like you're more willing to write about it, and C, like you have a more interesting story about like why you did this kind of research. But yeah, don't worry about like being too flashy. I know that like, especially like some of these like big like research camps, sorry, not these research, like science fairs, a lot of them care about like marketability. You know, these are all like very mainstream, very like publicized. But I think, you know, colleges like care about that to a certain degree. But I also think that like if you can show original scholarship in like any field, that is very impressive in its own right. And like you don't have to be some like mega like science fair winner to like get like rewards out of doing research. But yeah, that's it for you know, for the sake of time, I'm going to end the research portion of the talk here. Lastly, I'll talk about like high school life and how you should get better at high school. Okay. I'm just like curious about like the distribution. I guess I don't have the time here, but I'm like a little curious about the distribution of students who are here. But you know, for those of you who may be freshmen or like middle schoolers, I think freshman year, a lot of people like come in with this perception that like I need to come into college like with like my feet on the ground and like running immediately to make camp. Otherwise, like I won't make camp and like I'll be a bum. This is just not true. You know, I think every freshman should try lots of things. And you know, obviously this is like biology, this is like a USPO preparatory class, but I think that you should like really know if you want to do USPO and like why you want to do USPO, if like this is something you want to devote yourself to. Many finalists I've talked to actually like did not start competing in USPO until like their sophomore or like even their junior year, and they still made camp. So you don't have to like start when you're like a 6-year-old. And also I think you should not like neglect your social life. You know, most people are going to like be meeting new people during freshman year, and so like if you're like too locked in and like you don't meet any new friends, like this may like come to like bite you later. But also you can find like other communities. You can find your own communities. But yeah. Again, you should start building good study habits. You know, people are coming in from middle school, so they might not have the best of study habits. But I think just like being able to like manage like coursework, depending on like your school. I know like some schools assign a lot of homework, whereas like some schools don't assign that much homework. Fortunately, I went to a school that like did not give that much homework, so I had a lot more time to like spend on like my extracurricular. But if you go to a school that has lots of schoolwork, you know, people can still find some ways to be like successful outside of school, right? So you should be working on like your stress management and like your time management skills. These will like pay off in the long term. But yeah, you know, I think the breakups and the monotony in this presentation We put like a little cute like gift describing every year. But I think you should really like be trying to learn a lot and really like just absorb a lot of things that are new to high school. Okay. Next is sophomore year. So I think by sophomore year, like from freshman year, you're exploring a lot of things, and you should like start to know if like some of these things are actually things that like resonate with you. And so you should really start to like dig deeper into the activities that you really enjoy. If there's something that you really do like enjoy and like truly enjoy, not like you think you enjoy or like other people like convince you that you should enjoy, then you should like actually pursue this, right? And so here you can start like thinking, like digging deeper, putting more time into the commitments that you do, and really like leaning into your strengths. If you're very good at managing lots of things, great, then you should like do lots of things and be involved in a lot of things. But if you're not very great and you like really enjoy like sticking to one thing and being very focused on that, don't feel like you have to juggle like a ton of things just because that's like what everyone else is doing. I think I very much like leaned into my strengths in high school. Like I don't think I'm like a number one machine who can like handle every task and do everything. But I very much like picking one thing and like sticking to it. And that was my like philosophy when it came to USPO. For example, like in sophomore year, I did nothing but basically like play soccer, play violin, and like do USABO. And that was like my number one extracurricular. I spent like all my time in sophomore year, and that was the year I made the team for the first time. So this can like work in your favor. Really be really like play to your own strengths is my advice. And lastly, you should really like surround yourself with people that like both inspire you and like encourage you to be like better. I think this is the year I started like spending a lot more time like in the biology server, and so like that's why it felt very. I was very motivated to study for USPO because you know there's something I wanted to do. I had a lot of people who are also like similar minded to me, and so I like really locked in like my sophomore year is what I would say. Next is junior year. I think most of you, from my understanding, are like either sophomores or juniors. Junior year can be a very stressful year because you know obviously like college applications are looming. Maybe you're currently applying to like these summer research programs, so like there's just like a lot going on. But I think you should just like keep your eye on the prize and like do your best to like capitalize on what you on like the work that you did in freshman and sophomore year. Most like clubs and like other leadership positions go to like juniors and seniors, right? So you can like start to like get these like nice leadership positions in all your clubs. And also because like all of the like previous like seniors and stuff have started to graduate, you know, especially in Olympiads, many people camp for the first time in like junior year, and so a lot of your things are going to pay off, which is very nice. So I think junior year is very like a little kind of like um, a little bit of suffering, but also I think there's a lot of success in junior year. And for most people I know, like their research started getting published around here. They started doing really good in science fair around here. They got into like these awesome like research camps. They got into like camp or whatever. And so, you know, junior year can be very enjoyable if you like play your cards right. And also sleep. Sleep is very important. I did not sleep enough during high school, and I like kind of regret it because I think sleep like both like obviously is like good for your physical health, but also for your like mental health. You can't like answer like Olympiad questions like if you're like sleep deprived. And lastly, is senior year. Yeah, senior year is really, you know, I don't really have too much advice for seniors because like by the time you get to senior year, you've like made it in the most part. You just need to like wrap it up, like start your applications early, and you know, maintain the activities that you truly enjoy in. But just know that like once you're done with applications, you know, you can truly like you can either you can relax, but you can also like continue to like do things that you feel very passionate about. You know, like senior year, like I was pretty like burnt out. I think by the time like second semester came around, but I thought about it and I like truly did enjoy USPO, and so that's why I decided to come back for one more year. And you know, I don't regret that decision at all. I had a really great time at camp, and then obviously like IBO was super fun. But yeah, okay. You know, we're kind of running low on time, so I'm going to go through this portion very quickly. But my overall advice for high school can be boiled down into three things. First, you should find internal motivation. You should be honest with yourself at all points in your high school journey because ultimately, like, you're not servicing anyone but yourself. Especially this goes to some of the parents who may be in the audience. It's very tempting to like push your like kids like, oh, like you should do math competitions. In fact, like that's like what happened to me. Like I was pushed into doing math competitions when I was like in middle school, and I did quite well in those. But I was always doing it kind of like half-heartedly because like A, like I was like good at it, and B, like I thought I should do it, whereas like I actually wanted to do it was the difference. And so when it came to high school, I like had the autonomy to like choose I wanted to do USABO, and that is what like really fed my passion to do it. And likewise, you should truly like believe in yourself. Someone asked me like if I could go back in time and tell my freshman year like one thing, what would I tell them? I would literally just tell them that like it is possible for you to make camp. Because that was like a very big thing that I like did not believe in at the time. And so like just knowing that you can make camp, which I think is true for everyone, is just like very relieving and gives you a lot of like dedication to like actually working towards this task because you think it's going to get somewhere. So you can truly believe in yourself. at like all points like throughout your journey. Next, you should find a good community. I like have so much credit, or like I offer so much of my credit of like my success in high school to like actually my friends and like my mentors and my peers. You know, I think making camp like in freshman year was really set me up for success in like later years of high school because I like was introduced to all these like very amazing peers, and so I really like I talked to them all the time. I was very inspired by them. And obviously like they were doing cool stuff, so like I wanted to do cool things as well. And also like you hear about a lot of these like opportunities through like these like people. For example, like I only applied to RSI because like I had made use of it before. Otherwise, like I would never heard about RSI before. And so a lot of these things, like you should obviously like don't be like a dick about it. Like don't like be elitist and like only choose your friends because they think they're impressive. You should like be friendly to everyone. But specifically, like if you think there are like very people that like inspire you to be better and make you a better person, those are like good friends to keep around. Is what I think. And lastly, you should be interesting. Everyone wants to be like a STEM bot and like camp in like 10 billion things. And that's like he's very cracked. And this can be like very impressive to like a lot of high schoolers. I think high schoolers love people who are cracked. But I'm not sure colleges really enjoy that. Colleges want to, like obviously like very impressive resumes. But at the end of the day, like many people get into college for just like being interesting and having interesting life stories, not necessarily because they like were very, very impressive on paper. And so I think you should like not neglect your personal development and like definitely try to find intellectual enrichment in everything they can. There are a lot of like classes that in high school I like kind of blew off, but then I later found out that like really awoke some intellectual desire. Like I think a big regret is like I like found out like very late into like junior and like senior year that I really really liked physics because I had this great physics professor, physics teacher like in high school. And I think like in retrospect, maybe in freshman year I should have like given like USABO a try, or maybe like taken physics earlier instead of just like doubling down into USABO. Obviously, like I don't regret this, but I think there are like more and more facets of yourself that you will discover that like you did not know were there. And I think this is actually very interesting. Like, like just like as a person, this is great, but also like like even cynically, if you just care about like getting into college, this is useful for like applications and like essays and stuff. But okay. I'm gonna like fast forward through the application section because I want to leave more time for questions. But main thing is I think you should just start early and like keep track of all your deadlines and stuff. And again, be interesting but not performative. You should just be like genuinely interesting and like be yourself. And then if you think like I'm like not that interesting of a person, I guarantee that there is something interesting about you. You just might not know it, or you might not know how to communicate it. So you should always be interesting. And I think everyone is interesting. Lastly, when it comes to interviews, I'm not too sure how important these are for other schools, but I know for at least like for me, like Harvard, like I think places a lot of emphasis on their like alumni interviews. And so I think, just like be very cordial, be very professionally polite, but also like main thing is that you want to have a nice conversation above all. This isn't like a job interview, right? I think they actually want to know who you are instead of just like what skills do you bring to the table, right? Like I think turning this into like an actual conversation that your interviewer can remember and can actually write like good things about is like very. And so you should like maybe come in with like a short mental list of like topics you want to talk about or things that you feel very passionate about. Like for example, like in my interview, like she asked a little bit, she did the like classic, like, oh, like who are you? Like, what are you interested in? For like maybe 10 minutes. But then for like an hour, all we did was talk about like science fiction. Because like I was like very interested in science fiction and like I have a lot of thoughts about that. And like she wrote like a very, very glowing like alumni recommendation. And so you should like unabashedly be yourself. Like one of her biggest complaints was actually that like she thought like high schoolers are very pre-professional these days, which is fair. A lot of people are like, oh, I want to be a pre-med, I want to like go to grad school. But you should also just like be interested in like a lot of things purely for their like intellectual enjoyment is my advice. But yeah, I think this advice may be like kind of far off into the distance for some of you, but for at least for maybe some of the seniors who I think are like currently writing on their applications and have like interviews coming up, I think this is like my number one advice when it comes to like interviews at least. But yeah, okay. That's all that I had prepared. So I'll leave some time for questions. I know there's only 7 minutes, so I'm going to do my best to answer as many questions as possible. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Okay, I'm going to look at some questions here. Lisa asks, besides USABO and bio research, do I think participating in humanities or other activities are important for admission to other top schools? Well, obviously, I think this question, the obvious answer is yes, right? But like everyone has finite time, and so you should like think about like marginally, like is it more useful to like spend additional like hour on Usable or like an additional hour, like maybe like a few hours a week, like doing some other task. I think my biggest advice is that like you should like have one thing that you're like very good at, so like sounds impressive like on paper, but also you should like be a very well-rounded person. I think you should have like a spike is like what they call it. You should have a spike on your resume, but you should be a well-rounded person is my advice, because that pays off when it comes to like the personal factor and stuff. Um, Someone else asked, so the problem I'm facing is that for research, I'm cold emailing, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I think that's like a very fair question. A lot of high schoolers have like a lot of barriers to like accessing research. I think my advice is that like I would continue cold emailing professors, but also like try like emailing many different labs. And also like if it's very hard to work in a lab, you can also do like dry lab research. This is like very successful. I think most of the people I like met at science fairs, like a lot of them just did like pure like dry lab research, which is like not that interesting, but like still like gets your foot in the door and like tells you like how the research progress or how the research process works. Elizabeth asked, is there a specific order I would recommend reading the Campbell textbook? Like starting from a certain chapter or what? I think for other textbooks, yes, you should like read select chapters, maybe like in a specific order. But I think when it comes to Campbell, I think with the exception of chapter one, you should read every chapter in the book. That's because chapter one is like the introduction, like what is science? You can skip that one if you really want to, but it's like not that much work. It's like 20 minutes. I think you should read Campbell cover to cover at least one time. Um, you know, Preferably like 2 or 3 times. I think for me, at least, every year I would come back to do like the USPO cycle again. I would read Campbell again. So I've like read cumulatively, like I read Campbell 4 times. Yeah. JN asked, how do you prepare for the practicals in camp? I think that's a little outside the scope of this webinar, but I would just say like have good like lab intuition. I actually think that for like I'll go back to like the graph I had about like intuition versus like memorization as you go through USABO. I truly believe that like camp is like a lot of intuition is very important. This like keeps you light on your feet. You can always think, you know how to adapt. And the practical, they might not tell you the solution, so you can't follow. You actually have to think of like the lab procedure to do. So I think like building intuition is good for that. Anish asks, how do you stand out in terms of research? Because I feel like everyone is doing it these days. That's a fair concern. Honestly, everyone is doing it these days. I think when it comes to standing out in research, I think it's a hard question. I think obviously like pursuing like scholarship is great. Like if you can get published, you should try to get published. If you can compete in these science fairs and do well, obviously you should do that. But I think outside of that as well, I just think like being very genuine with your research. I think I've like spoken to like a couple of admissions officers actually like at MIT and Harvard, and I've like asked their thoughts on like research and like science fairs and stuff. And they're like, honestly, I think they're a little tired too. Like research was like very like impressive like maybe 10 years ago, but nowadays like everyone's doing research and everyone's competing in these science fairs. And so like just like making sure you come off like as genuine and you do like real research, like do good serious research that you can actually talk about and your methods like through and through, so that you can like talk to length about it. I think that comes off as very genuine and very impressive. Is like my advice. But yeah, I agree. I agree that like a lot of it is luck. I think a lot of these science fairs actually come down to a lot of luck because it's very subjective, like day to day. Like, did this judge like his project or my project? And like what background does the judge come from? So I would not be discouraged if you do not well in science fair. I think a lot of these are subjective metrics, which is like not to like knock at research at all. Research is inherently a very subjective process, right? But like don't get discouraged by that. Is what I would say. Plenty of people get into college doing research without ever having competed in the science fair. Yeah. What do I think is the most important thing slash strategy that got you to camp in USPO in only a year? That's a great question. I think okay, it's kind of hard for me to remember all the way back, but honestly, I would just say that like having good problem solving skills is like more important than like knowledge at least. Like anyone can like learn, anyone can like read more and like memorize more content, but like really having a good problem solving base is very I like think I was like a very big like intuition like main when it came to USPO, but like sometimes you just like read a question, you just like knee jerk like think that this is the right answer. That's like not a very satisfying answer, but that's what I would say. I think for me like intuition is very important. Okay, it seems like we have a lot of questions, but not a lot of time, so I'm going to pick a good question now. Um, Julian asked, how do I balance USPO and a ton of like courses at school? I think my answer is a kind of cop out answer. I think my school just like was not very rigorous. Like they did not assign too much work. So I feel like I had like a few hours of schoolwork a week, but like compared to like some of my friends that I've heard about, like I had a very like light experience. So I think in general, I would say block out time. I like to totally subscribe to the notion that like work, the time it takes to do work expands to fill the container you give it. I mean that like if you give yourself 4 hours to do something, it'll take 4 hours. So I think you should like hierarchy, you should like put like useful reading time number one. And then I guarantee you that you'll find time to finish your coursework. Um, like in the time that you have. Obviously, like try not to like have this come at the cost of sleep. But I would say that like really block out a time. Like I would come home, I would like read like for like 3 hours at least, like the second I came home. Also like finding like small snippets of time throughout the day. Like every time like I was like on the bus to school, I had like 30 minutes, I would read there. Like maybe I finished my like assignment early in class, I would like read a little here. During like lunch, sometimes I would like read a little. I swear I had a good time in high school. But like I would just like find time to read throughout the day. And this can like add up quite a bit over a year. But yeah. Okay. Arian asked, when I was studying for USABO, how much time do I usually spend? I think freshman year, it was very fortunate. It was during online school, so I had like plenty of free time. Cause like it was online and it was asynchronous for like 2 hours like during lunch. So I would read for at least like 2 hours a day. So I think freshman year maybe like 3, 4 hours a day. Sophomore year also like probably 4 hours a day. Junior year I kind of chilled out on the USABO studying because I was doing like research and other stuff. So maybe like 1 hour a day. I still studied because like I made camp that year. But then I think senior year I did not do any studying until after second semester. And second semester I think I read like maybe 3, 4 hours a day. So I think my average was like 3 to 4, which is like not the most like excessive, but also like definitely like non-trivial amounts of time. Okay. Seems like I guess we're staying a bit longer for more questions, so I'll go back and answer some more question. Um, uh, Lisa asks, I've mentioned being confident. Before taking these final, did I ever feel certain that I would make camp? And the answer is no. You can ask like some of the other like people in the class. But a big thing is that like it's like kind of a meme in the USBO community. I was like extremely unconfident as a high schooler. I like had a lot of like imposter syndrome and like a lot of like confidence problems, and I just thought like, oh, like I'll never be able to compete. But clearly, like I was like as wrong could be about that. And so I think yes, a lot of people are very discouraged, but I would say that like you should truly believe in yourself. I think only when I like actually, this is very cliche, but only when I actually did believe in myself is like when I really like studied very well. In sophomore year, like I knew I could make camp, so I was very determined to make camp again, and that was the year that I like made camp. Oh, sorry, I made team. So I would say, it's like hard if you have like no like quote unquote like back like hard evidence for like why you can make camp. But like take it from me, I'll give everyone an endorsement. I think all of you can make camp. And so if that's like the evidence that you need to like really believe, then I hope that like you can like truly believe in yourself. I think that's my number one piece of advice for this presentation, is to like believe in yourself. Okay. Okay, seems like we have more questions. How did I avoid burnout and sometimes losing motivation? Great question. I mean, like I think I dodged burnout until I got into a senior, and then when I was a senior, like it hit me pretty hard. But I think a big part is that I like just did not find like USABO as like work. I like enjoyed reading textbooks. I read textbooks because I wanted to. I've always loved reading, and so like yes, like if you're like studying very hard, but it was also like the process itself was enjoyable. And so like if the process itself is not enjoyable for you, then that like causes you to lose motivation. Like I think it should just be like, genuinely interesting and genuinely enjoyable for you. And if it's not, maybe like you're supposed to not cut out for you, but also maybe you're just not like studying the right way. If you study the right way, then it can be very enjoyable to you. Like if I had to like sit down in a room and like read for 6 hours straight, like I would not enjoy that. But if I read like in 30-minute blocks like throughout the day, I would enjoy that. And so like maybe like rephrasing it can like be helpful to you. Is my advice. Jean Han asked, is it too late for me to start studying for the competition in sophomore year? What did I say during this presentation? I think no. I think it's not too late. I think if you're a sophomore right now, you should start like today. Um, and like I think you'll be able to make camp by junior year, especially if you like take the course. I think. Eric asked, how do you stop procrastinating? I need help. Honestly, that's a great question. As a college student, I think we're all D1 procrastinators. But I think again, my advice is still you should do the hardest tests, or also like the tasks that like take fixed time. You should like do those first. And then the like easier tasks or tasks that like have like not fixed time, they'll like fit in like the spaces that you have left. That's what I would say. Jay asked, did I use flashcards? The answer is actually no, I did not use flashcards. I was like not a flashcard user at all. But I think I have like very good like what's the word? Like conceptual recall. I think I remember like concepts quite well. Maybe not like discrete facts. But I think like when I learn a concept once, like I can understand that concept and keep it for quite a long time. So it depends on you. But for at least for me, I did not like think that flashcards would be useful for me.
I want to thank
Yeah.
everyone for all their great questions, and I wish we had more time for this. I want to thank Jason for taking time out of his very busy schedule to meet with all of us. That was a very enlightening talk. If you have questions that were unanswered, we will try to, in the future blog posts and other writings on our website, we're gonna try to get to them. So please visit our website frequently and look at our resources. We're really trying to work very hard to get that updated for all of you. I want to thank you all again for joining us tonight. It was so wonderful to see all of you, and I hope to see you or your student in one of our courses in the future soon. Have a very good night, everyone. I'm so sorry I have to end this soon, but we do have class, and we are very dedicated to making sure that our classes happen and happen efficiently. So I hope you are willing to cooperate with us in that regard. And thank you all for a great night.